I'm Ryan O'Dowd, and you're listening to Ryan's Audiobooks on the Issues Magazine YouTube channel. Today we continue with Section 616, Prometheus Rising, by Robert Anton Wilson. Chapter 10, How to Brainwash Friends and Robotize People. There is no government, no industrial military complex, no economic system, no mass media that can ever reduce us to puppets and robots as thoroughly as the biological and environmental dictatorships have. F.M. Esfandiari in Upwingers. As noted earlier, when the biosurvival circuit flashes danger, all other mental activity ceases. There's no time on the biosurvival circuit. Reflexes act without emotional ego, rational mind, or adult personality participating. I just found myself doing it. All the martial arts, judo, aikido, kung fu, etc., are re-imprinting techniques for the biosurvival circuit. They are intended to ensure that what happens mechanically, without thought, really does serve biosurvival, since the reflexes imprinted accidentally on the circuit are not that dependable. The mechanical nature of the biosurvival circuit is of key importance in brainwashing. To create a new imprint, reduce the victim to an infantile state, i.e. first circuit vulnerability. As pointed out in the last chapter, an army begins this process with the draft notice, which informs the subject that his body no longer belongs to him but the government. The SL army, seeking quicker brain change, began the conversion of Patty into Tanya by taking her at gunpoint, but the message was the same. We can do what we want with your body from now on. First circuit biosurvival instincts thus became hooked to obeying those who have this awesome power, just as the infant learns to hook its biosurvival circuitry to the parental figures. Patty's ride in the trunk of a car after being taken at gunpoint is a classic rebirth ritual. The trunk is even womb-like in its contours. When the trunk opened, she was reborn into the new reality tunnel, that of her captors. Similarly, where the earliest forms of Masonic initiation survive and have not been diluted, note the Adeptus Major ritual in the Complete Golden Dawn System of Magic by Israel Regardie, Falcon Press, 1983. The candidate is thrown into a well and then raised as a newborn Freemason. Total submersion, the form of baptism preferred by Protestant fundamentalists, imitates this, but without the real anxiety that made traditional Masonry and the SLA so effective as brain change agent. All brainwashers empirically know, without in most cases ever having read Leary's 8-circuit model of the brain, that the oral biosurvival circuit seeks bonding with a mothering figure. To increase panic and imprint vulnerability, then, the subject, after being seized by the brainwashers, U.S. or SL Army, secret police, or whatever they may be in a given case, is isolated from all those to whom bonding had previously been established. The draftee is sent to boot camp and sees no loved ones, wife, girlfriend, parents, etc. for a number of weeks or months. The political prisoner is thrown into a dungeon. Patty Hearst was locked in a closet as soon as she was rebirthed out of the trunk of the car. Experiments in isolation by the U.S. Marine Corps by Dr. John Lilly and others, and the records of shipwrecked sailors summarized by Lilly in Simulations of God, show that only a few hours of pure isolation may be necessary before hallucinations begin. These hallucinations, like those of psychedelic drugs, indicate the breaking down of previous imprints and onset of vulnerability to new imprints. The need to bond the biosurvival circuit to somebody or something is indicated by the giraffe who imprinted on the hunter's jeep as a mother substitute. Similarly, children without siblings, especially those in remote rural areas, often invent imaginary playmates, which can become real enough to frighten the parents into suspecting the onset of psychosis. Dr. Lilly's records of sailors and explorers in isolation show that such guides, companions, or holy guardian angels reappear quickly even in adulthood when normal social contact is removed. They also come promptly to those undergoing the mysterious state called near-death or out-of-body experience, e.g. when the heart stops on the operating table. The first human being who appears to the subject after this isolation can easily become bonded as the mother substitute, or next best as a father substitute. This explains why people held prisoner by terrorists, e.g. on hijacked airplanes, often develop a paradoxical sympathy for those who are threatening to kill them. It also explains why the draftee begins to look on his kidnappers as protectors as well as captors, and why the brainwash victim begins to please, gratify, and eventually respect the brainwasher. In all cases, since the biosurvival circuit is key to nourishment, those who bring food become possible subjects for bonding. The political prisoner, the draftee, the subject kidnapped by terrorists, all move somewhat closer to identification, bonding with their captors as they are fed regularly. Again, this is imitated crudely by various religions, without the terror that creates true imprint vulnerability, by following baptism rebirth rituals with a communal meal of Holy Eucharist. Adaptations of these principles can be applied even to those who walk into the brainwashing environment voluntarily at first, as in People's Temple, the Manson family, and similar organizations. The first step once the victim is inside the territory is to begin isolation, by cutting off all communication with the outer world and its conflicting reality tunnels. Meanwhile, a parental protective atmosphere is quickly created, sometimes called love bombing, and food is provided. Whether the subject has entered voluntarily, as in these communes, or has been kidnapped or arrested, as in police states, the next stage is to break down the Second Circuit emotional territorial imprints. This means that the subject continues to be fed, maintaining their First Circuit oral dependence, while the Second Circuit ego is attacked in every manner possible. A point-by-point comparison of the techniques of a Synanon gamer and U.S. Army drill sergeant, for instance, would show astonishing similarities since the basic message is dozens and dozens of variations on "you are all wrong, we are all right." It's extremely unlikely that someone as wrong as you will ever become right ever, but we will try to teach you. The anal vocabulary of territorial status is, of course, employed extensively. The ideal subject may almost forget his or her name, become conditioned to answering to "you asshole, come here." The sense of bottom dog helplessness can be escalated by periodic doses of real terror. One of Charlie Manson's famous sayings was, "Fear is the great teacher," and every brainwasher would agree ardently. In communist countries, as dramatized in Kostogavra's fine and factual film The Confession, a favorite trick is to take the subject out of his cell, march him to a courtyard, place a noose about his neck, and convince him he's about to be hanged. The relief when this turns out to be a bluff creates ideal imprint vulnerability. A variation in my novel Illuminatus has the victim persuaded he has been poisoned, dumped in a coffin, and the lid slammed upon him. Those who have been initiated as Mark Master Freemasons will recognize at once the same technique is the mark that you will carry to your grave. Among the Zuni Indians, the male at adolescence is kidnapped by masked demons who carry him away from the tribe, away from the mother and other imprinted security figures. He's dragged out into the desert and threatened with whips. Then the masks come off, revealing his maternal uncles, and in that moment of imprint vulnerability, the tribal secrets, the local reality tunnel, are explained in a way that leave an indelible mark on his consciousness. Similar rites of passage are found in all the tribes, few as cleverly designed as this one. Symbolic and diluted versions survive in bar mitzvahs and confirmation ceremonies in our local mega-tribes. The rebirthing of the Second Circuit is relatively complete when the bottom dog subject begins to seek sincerely, not hypocritically, to win approval of the top dogs. This is, of course, only begins as play acting. The skilled brainwasher knows that and does not really object. With subtle reinforcement, the play acting becomes more and more genuine. Edmund Burke noted long ago, and every method actor knows, that you cannot make 3 dramatic gestures of rage in a political speech without beginning to feel some rage. You cannot make 3 gestures of submission without feeling really submissive. This is the psychology of the company man, who truly identifies with his employer after years of obedience. The draftee first tries to please the sergeant to avoid further humiliation and punishment. Gradually, he genuinely wants to please the sergeant, i.e. prove he is not all wrong and is good enough to be a soldier. Patty Hearst undoubtedly pretended to accept the SLA reality tunnel at first, and gradually found the presence becoming more and more real. This process is accelerated by a system of occasional rewards, as the subject more and more often emits, as the behaviorists would say, the desired behaviors. Since people are more complicated than behaviorists know, it is necessary to vary this with occasional punishments for insincerity or backsliding. So the subject learns that after the initial stage, it's not enough to pretend to accept the new reality tunnel. To escape further humiliation, ego loss, terrorism, and permanent bottom dog status, one must begin to accept it sincerely. After the imprint of helplessness had been made, this conditioning and learning will proceed fairly smoothly, especially if the chief brainwasher's confederates reinforce it with encouragement, support, and general reward for sincere submission, and contempt, disappointment, and general rejection for insincerity or backsliding. Re-imprinting the third semantic circuit can now follow easily. The human brain is capable of mastering any symbol system if sufficiently motivated. Some people can even play Beethoven's late piano music, although to me this is as miraculous as any feat alleged by psychic researchers. People can learn French, Hindustani, differential calculus, Swahili, etc. ad infinitum, if motivated. When the first security needs have been reprinted, and second circuit ego needs have been hooked to mastering a new semantic reality tunnel, that tunnel will be imprinted. At this point, a certain amount of arbitrary nonsense is of great value. That is, the new reality tunnel or symbol system, like the old one, should contain pitfalls, gross violations of previous reality tunnels and common sense, so that the subject can be accused of backsliding, being all wrong, after all, and thereby incited to try harder to become part of the new reality tunnel. Thus, Jehovah's Witnesses may not accept blood transfusions even if their life depends on it. Harder still, since all mammals have an instinct to protect their young, they must reject blood transfusions for their children, even if the children die of neglect. A Roman Catholic woman may not be divorced even if her husband comes home drunk every night, beats her up, and gives her VD. In the U.S. Marines, a recruit who commits the hideous crime of calling a rifle a gun must walk around the base with his rifle in one hand and his penis in the other, reciting to everybody he meets, "This is my rifle, this is my gun, this is for fighting, this is for fun." Theosophists were once required to believe that there is a hole at the North Pole going down to the center of the Earth. Manson required his followers to believe the hole was in the Mojave Desert. Nazi party members were asked to believe that the lion is an Aryan animal and the rabbit non-Aryan, etc. The neurological and sociological function of such nonsense, which makes the rationalists gasp in shock, is to sharply segregate those within the new reality tunnel from those outside. This makes for group solidarity, group reinforcement, and a strong sense of alienation and discomfort when on rare occasions it's necessary to talk at all with those outside the brainwasher's semantic system. The group must ensure, of course, that this alienation is experienced as a superiority. Those who are outside the reality tunnel must be perceived as all wrong, just as the subject was before being brainwashed. Drugs can be and have been used to fine-tune these processes, but the general neurological principles are powerful enough that it's likely that many famous cases of brainwashing were accomplished as above described without any drugs at all, e.g. the American soldiers who confessed to war crimes which they evidently had not committed, the loyal communists who confessed to Trotskyite conspiracies which seemingly never existed, etc. It takes very few weeks for most armies without drugs to convert a civilian into a soldier, even though the two species are as different as Roman Catholics and Shintoists. Thus concludes section 616 of Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson. Tomorrow we'll continue with chapter 10, How to Brainwash Friends and Robotize People, in section 617. I will see you then. Alam.